Did we talk about these helmet stripes the Cowboys have on?
The red, what is it that is that just like a flex on America's team? Is that all that is?
I think that's probably it. I think it might be Odell stuff, right?
That seems like a Jerry Jones thing.
Yeah. So he's rolling out the the America stripe for Odell.
Apparently. I
Oh,
hate the
boy.
word. I hate that we're bidding against Jerry Jones.
Well, we had somebody come into Spaces on Friday and bring up the photo of Jerry at that came out from the desegregation of schools, that whole thing, and it was yeah. So he thought that could be an issue for Odell. So who knows?
I guess I don't know how old of.
It was from a while ago. It was from 60 years ago, I think. But
okay. But
yeah,
it was it
was problematic
in the moment. Okay, it's interesting.
Yeah.
It's the famous photo when they desegregated in Little Rock, Arkansas, back in like the early 60s. And it's one of the famous photos that they took when the kids were going to school for the first day. And there's a whole, all the other, students that had already been there were kind of like blocking the path. And, you could see his face in there. He was young.
Okay. Interesting. I don't know that I knew that he was part. I mean, obviously now connecting that it was in Arkansas and things like that, but I never knew he was part of that moment.
He was in the photo, at least.
Interesting.
It's tough to say.
Whatever could come of that, things that could benefit me that make no sense, I'm supportive of it. That sounds fine. That should be a differentiating factor for Odell Beckham Jr. for sure.
Yeah, the official headline of that is Cowboys owner Jerry Jones is one of the bullies trying to stop black classmates from desegregation in 1957.
Wow!
So that's the headline.
Wow. Okay. Yeah. We'll avoid the rest of that topic for the night.
The headline is that dude's old. That dude's old.
He was 14. How about this? He was 14 in 1957.
Want to know what always kills me to realize how old he is? They obviously just showed his owner's box on the game. When you see his son, Stephen Jones, and you're like, man, Stephen Jones is really old. And then you're like, oh, God, Jerry Jones is his dad. Like, they're not like coworkers or brothers. Like, that's his dad. He's just had a ton of plastic surgery.
Yeah.
Jeez.
It's a tough, it's definitely not great.
So that would be my last topic for the night. Do you guys think that Odell Beckham Jr. is legitimately possible? That my one thing, I said it on the show Wednesday night or after the postgame show on Thursday night, was that getting him in a room with Josh Allen and Josh's energy was our one possible trump card. That, if it comes down to city, weather, money, anything like that, Dallas is going to win. Just the things that that OBJ is looking for. We can't compete. Buffalo cannot compete with Dallas from a city and weather and climate, and the Cowboys have more cap space than we do, and Jerry will, ridiculously overspend for things he shouldn't even spend on, regardless of whether it makes sense or not. The one thing we have is if we get OBJ in a room with Josh Allen, there's a chance that he leaves that going, I got to play with that dude.
Yes.
That's the one thing I can cling to. Do you think there's a legit shot that that's enough?
I think the best recruiter is, yes, we all like Von Miller. I think it's Stefon Diggs. You know why? Because of the relationship those two have. I think it's Stefon Diggs saying, look, I was tentative to come to Buffalo. They made a move for me. They really wanted me, just like they do in this situation. Look at the relationship me and Josh have. Look at the raw videos of us actually loving each other and being really good teammates. You could come be a part of that and, talk to a couple players who have been their best selves. I think some of that plays. I think that plays for sure. And I think that's the trump card of here's Josh. He's a star. Von came here because of this. I think all of that is their main, if not their only, but it's their main selling point to why he would decide to play a 2-year, 3-year deal here.
How about you, Chris?
Josh himself, and also the culture that's been created within the whole organization as a result of Josh and his personality, and everything kind of stems from that. But yeah, I think that Josh, our Josh, was talking about this recently And just, how when you're talking about New York and Dallas being big cities and all the nightlife and everything, an exciting night with the Bills is probably a bunch of football players hanging out at Josh's house in Eden. But to be honest, like there might be something refreshing about that. And I know for some people it has been refreshing. And, you want to go and play your game, and, get it done on the football field. You go to Buffalo,
Yeah.
and then you can go to Miami or New York or LA in any other time of the
Yeah,
year.
all of our guys own businesses and have houses in South Beach and LA, just like every other team. But when it's time to, strap in and get to work, they come to Buffalo.
And you have a nice piece of property up here too, like a nice piece of property with nice land, and like there's something to be said about it. He's always mentioned, Odell has, about wanting to build a family. Like, what a great place to lay some roots in, and I think it really does matter. And I think the one thing I wanted to ask you guys, I was going to talk about this on our show Tuesday, was, do you think that there's any like strange feeling though if you're Stefon Diggs or any of the recruiters of this little trip? Because they're coming in this room and saying how much he'd help be the receiver too to help this. Do you think there's any like weird feelings on like, what if he picks somewhere else and then he sits in a room with Gabe Davis and Isaiah McKenzie, lesser Khalil Shakir, but like, does that matter? Like, I think that's like a little bit of a thing if he doesn't end up picking here, and you're like, yeah, sorry.
So I think from a human element, there's no possibility that Gabe Davis, Isaiah McKenzie, Khalil Shakir wouldn't have that in the back of their minds. However, I think that OBJ is such an obvious talent that it would be very naive for anyone to think that, well, they shouldn't go after him because I'm here and they don't need him. Like, I think he's kind of gives them an easy out because he's such a big name and such an obvious talent that it's like, well, yeah, of course we need to go talk to that guy if he's interested in coming here. So I think he's a big enough piece that it almost makes it not that big of a deal.
Like, do you think more or less than, like, say it was like Christian Kirk?
Sure. I think if you went down a little bit, down a couple tiers, whatever it might, I'm trying to think of an example of, if Antonio Brown tried to get his life together and was going to be like, listen, like, that dude ain't got it anymore. He's crazy. We don't need to go after that. I think seeing the fact that, like, he was literally on pace to be the Super Bowl MVP, 10 months ago, and, it just made it pretty obvious that, like, hey, he's that guy. It's okay to. Everyone would want to see that guy play.
The team leaders being all in will quiet any of that talk.
Yeah,
when you see 17 and 14 and 40, when they're all in, if you're Khalil Shakir, not that your opinion doesn't matter, your feelings don't count, but it's a business and those guys are here to win. And I think you just keep your head down, and if this guy comes in, you do your best. But what are you going to do? If you're off to the side complaining about that, you're going to lose way more credibility in that locker room than you will if he comes in, you keep your head down, you win a Super Bowl, and then he moves in. Like, if you take that well, I think that builds your credibility here for the next 3 years.
100%. That's the kind of thing like that. Whoever it is, let's say there's a Roger Saffold pulls Gabe Davis aside and says, hey, man, just put your head down and show them that you were the guy anyways. That even though they brought in OBJ, you're still the guy. Just put in that work and go into, go in to show them that you deserve it anyways. That's the approach you got to make no matter what.
Didn't we see James Cook a little with Nyheim Hines? Like, a little bit? Like, can we say a little bit? Like, it might have given him, like, a final rookie push?
Yeah, that whole iron sharpens iron mentality that McDermott and the rest of the staff are always preaching, and there's something to it. I think that guys should look at competition as opportunity. I mean, not only to prove what they can do, but to get better themselves. I mean, you bring in somebody like Odell. I mean, he's been in the league for a long time. He's an elite receiver. I would think that there's plenty that guys like Gabe Davis and Khalil Shakir can learn from having someone like him around.
So Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Greg.
No, I had a listener ask a question about the contract. So is it still about OBJ?
I was just gonna say, like the bottom of the bottom of the roster is so fluid, anyways. These guys are competing against the guys on the practice squad. They're competing against street free agents that they bring in every week. Kind of quietly. So like the bottom 20 guys on the roster don't feel secure week to week on most teams.
Yeah, that's a great point. And that that they're worried about just keeping their job and keeping their role regardless of who gets brought in. Gabe Davis is probably the one who would have some, feel a certain sort of way about it, and it would be understandable. But, he also has had opportunity to make it obvious that they didn't need to do this, and he hasn't done that. So,
he had Emmanuel Sanders come in, right? And his second year, he had kind of already taken over that number 2 role after John Brown got hurt his rookie season, and then he kind of went back down the depth chart to make room for Emmanuel Sanders.
Yeah, that's spot on. So the question, Mexico Marty, who by the way, I gave a shout out to on Twitter the other day. He's a great follow as well. So appreciate your question, Marty. He asked, "What's the most irresponsible contract I'd be comfortable with giving OBJ?" That's a great way to phrase it. So, and he actually mentions a number that I've thrown around. There's a path where, so the Bills, and for anybody who doesn't know, Kevin's also very good with salary cap and knows his numbers really well. He and I have talked a bit in our DMs about like the Bills, without playing with anything in the future, about the maximum they can give OBJ is around 7 to 7.4 million. Like where one, you have to account for a chunk of minimum salary, and then what does that leave in cap space? And what's the most you could prorate that cap space over 5 years in the form of a signing bonus? And it works out to about $7 to $7.4 million. That range is about the max that they can pay right now. Now, if they add in anything into the future with void years and with additional things with guaranteed option bonuses that wouldn't pay out until next year's league year, now you open up everything and you can get crazy. You can go into next year where right now it looks like at the very most he's going to play 2 games in the regular season this year, maybe 3, but most likely 2. And that means that anything for next year that you put in an incentive, if he didn't achieve it this year, it's called not likely to be earned incentives. And you see that NTLBE acronym used. What that means is if it's not likely to be earned, the team doesn't have to count it against their cap. So just as some easy examples, you could set a $3 million incentive for 20 catches for next year. And you can set another $3 million incentive for 300 yards for next year. And you could set another $3 million incentive for 4 touchdowns for next year. All of them will be not likely to be earned incentives because he's not going to get 20 catches for 300 yards and 4 touchdowns in the last 2 games of the year here when he's ramping up for the playoffs. So it wouldn't count against the cap. The Bills wouldn't even pay it until 2024 if he did achieve it next year. But he and his agent could count that as, what often people will call it as virtually guaranteed or realistically guaranteed. It's not actually guaranteed. It's not a literal guarantee. But those are so achievable that he could count it there. And that gives the Bills some flexibility where you could build something that looks like a prorated version for this year and then next year and the year after, $15 million a year, that kind of money, where they can play around with the numbers with void years and option bonuses and not likely to be earned incentives where they don't destroy the cap for this year or next year. And he still gets, realistically, you can still probably get him $22 million in the first 18 months of that deal in cash without crippling the cap. So, regardless of all that rambling, money will not be the reason that he does or does not pick here. If they want him, they can make it work and they can get irresponsible if they want to. But either way, the money won't be the reason. It would take Jerry Jones giving him 3 years and $60 million and a huge chunk of it guaranteed up front for it not to work.
So how long do you think we have to wait before we find out what the decision
He said
is?
early this week.
I think it's Tuesday or
Okay.
Wednesday. I legit
Okay.
do. I think that we find out before Thursday Night Football for this week.
Then we can stop
Yeah.
all the madness.
I do think that the Dallas getting the Monday, it's theirs to lose in a way. As long as
Yep.
Odell has the good feels, he likes it there. Jerry's not being cheap, which he has known to do all of that.
Yeah, Dallas has more cap space than us, so that if he just wants a 1-year deal, they can throw the most money at him, and he can go back into free agency in the spring and cash in again.
But he'll have more competition in the spring, right?
Yeah, then getting a $10 million signing bonus from Dallas right now, prorated out, and then go back and double dip in the spring. He could do both those things.
We've got a few minutes left here. Before we give our final thoughts, I just want to thank everyone for listening. If you could, please like this video, leave a comment in the comment section. That really helps. And of course, if you haven't already, please subscribe to this channel. What big receivers are coming into free agency that he'd have to compete with
it's actually
in the offseason?
It's actually not an amazing free agency class for receivers.
I operated under the fact of like he's the one picking his destination, that at least these three teams are semi-serious, and if they were selected, they'd be able to work out some type of comparable deal. So that's kind of how I've operated this, thinking that it's his decision. But there could be some, like he came into Buffalo and Bean was like, no, you don't. Like I don't know. I don't see why the Bills would waste their time in December right now doing that.
I've heard people saying that they're not doing workouts during these trips.
Yeah, which makes it interesting. Interesting.
Yeah, but that doesn't mean they're not doing medical exams.
Physicals,
Sure.
Yeah.
So it's, yes, is he not like out there running 3-cone drills in a 40 and one-on-one drills against a receiver? Maybe not, but they're also getting some assurance. And he's represented by Rosenhaus, right?
I'm not sure about that. Do you know, Kevin?
I have not heard that. Is he?
Oh, maybe I just assumed that. But either way, his agent has a vested interest in managing that relationship. They can't just blatantly lie and be like, "Oh no, he's ready," and then find out, "Oh no, we were just kidding, he's not ready." Like,
right. Yeah.
Like that's not
that's not a likely scenario at all.
It says
yeah, correct. Like if they're saying that he can play, that it's got to be,
Dallas has not offered a certain dollar amount with his agent Zeke Sandhu.
That's what I just found. That's the first time I've ever seen that name in my entire life. Right now, the 3 seconds before you read it, I Googled it as well. That's the first time I've ever seen that name.
How long has Zeke been an agent? I'll ask Don about Zeke tomorrow.
Yeah, the CEO and founder of Elite Athletic Management.
He's got to be better than Lamar's agent.
Yeah, I guess.
Is it Lamar's own agent?
Another question for tomorrow.
I would say Lamar's agent is his mom, I thought.
Yeah, I thought so. Yeah, it's like a family member.
That is not me trying to make a joke. I legitimately believe his legal representation is his mother.
Yeah, you're right.
Which, nothing against her, nothing against Lamar, but you should have a real agent.
Whatever. That's a super, super interesting approach. We'll see how everything goes.
At this time, we're going to pass the baton to our friends Kyle Salagi and David Fox at the Cover One Roundup. Don't go anywhere.